Welcome to Xplore. Thank you so much for taking the time out to come and join your group today. We are so excited about these next 6 weeks, about taking hands with you, about seeing you walk closer to Jesus. My name is Philip, and I have the incredible privilege of being a pastor of this church, Shofar Church. Your host is part of our church, and we've been praying with you. We've been praying for you in the build-up to this week, and we're going to continue praying for you over the next few weeks. We're praying that as we spend time together speaking about Jesus, discovering Jesus, learning about Him, that His grace will be poured into our hearts. We see Jesus as He invites His disciples in the Gospels. He invites them along the lines of come and see. A simple invitation, come and see who I am. Come and see my life. Come and follow me. And as we begin to follow Him, He changes us dramatically. And we want to invite you for these next 6 weeks to come and see. To come and walk with Jesus as we explore together who He is through the Word of God and through different people of God who've gotten to know Him in a variety of different ways. I'm joined today by Edna and Rob, friends of ours who just want to share a bit of their story, of our stories, and that's the format we're going to be taking for these 6 weeks. In the video session, we're going to have a short discussion, a conversation about God, about what He's done in our lives. But for us, what's most important is that then you continue that conversation in your groups, that you share where you're at, where your experience is, what you've heard from God, what you feel God is leading you today to do, the questions that you have. Let's be honest about where we are in our walk with Christ. So welcome again. Enjoy these next 6 weeks. Rob, as we thinking about following Jesus, drawing you to Him, walking with Him, and the invitation of coming to see, come and see. What were the things initially when you decided to follow Christ, to learn more about Him? Can you remember what were the things that stirred in your heart that said, man, there's something here that I want to pursue and learn more about?
I think, Philip, for me it was a combination of things. I know I was quite a young person when I came to the Lord, and it was a combination of friends inviting me, and I know that when I was young I was seeking a lot. Coming from a family that had a variety of different beliefs, there was a lot of confusion about what's right and what's wrong, and where I can find truth and where I can find answers. So I think with friends actually inviting me to it, I was quite open to begin with, and I think going with and seeing the community as well that people had, and the fact that people had these like strong friendships as well, it really stirred something in me. But I think as well, I think the main thing was just there was longing in my heart, and there was a desire to be fulfilled by something. So I think when I came to church, initially I came to a church that I didn't really know much about, and spending some time in worship there, and hearing the message of who Jesus is, and knowing that there's hope there, that there's answers there, that really stirred a lot in me, and that's initially what drew me. It's just this thing of I can find answers there, I can find hope there. So. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were quite young, but you didn't grow up in a church environment, did you? The family that you were with, give us a little bit of insight, sort of that initial phase, that first step. I mean, going to church, having never gone to church, why go? Why take that step? Why not say, nah, it's not for me?
So in my family we had a variety of different beliefs. So this kind of included a bit of African traditional beliefs in there, a bit of New Age beliefs as well. And in the midst of that also there was a strain of Christian beliefs in there somewhere, and how exactly all these things coexisted I have no idea, but it was more initially a thing of guilt in my family, of like we'll go to church maybe once every 5 years or something, and that's by a miracle that it actually happened, and I think maybe it started like that, but I know it was initially just friends inviting me. That was, I think, the big driving point was just, they invited me and I was young, so it started with stuff like wanting to meet girls at youth and stuff. So it was quite immature reasons for going, but faithful friends really just pushing through to actually see me be there as well. So
okay, great. Yeah. Your environment slightly different.
Completely different from Rob's, which is very, I don't know. I was raised Roman Catholic, so from growing up in Zimbabwe with my grandmother, we were Roman Catholic. Went to Roman Catholic school, and So that's all I knew. And so when I came to South Africa, I couldn't find a Roman Catholic church, and I just decided I'm going to stop going to church for almost 4 years. I didn't go to church in that moment, in that season. So I started going clubbing. I started doing the wrong stuff with the wrong people. Started finding my identity in the wrong places. Drinking, doing a lot of bad stuff. And I really went through a very tough time. I was in an abusive relationship for almost 3 years that time. So it was very tough for me. It messed me up emotionally, physically, in all ways you can imagine. And I remember I got a job at a restaurant in Linwood, and I was working there with one guy that used to tell me about Jesus the whole time. But because I was so religious in my ways and I was stuck in my ways, I didn't want to hear about it. So you'd come to me and be like, Jesus loves you. And I'm like, I don't know, I know who this Jesus is, because in Roman Catholic we do know there's Jesus and there's Mary and there's a lot of things. So I was a bit confused in who Jesus was, and he continued. He was very persistent about telling me about Jesus, inviting me to church. He was in Shofar as well. And so I remember in 2014, I decided to come to Shofar in January, and I was like, who are these people? They're lifting up hands. What is happening here? I don't understand. And I remember one of the ladies that was there, Ramu, spoke a word over me. I don't even remember what it was, but it was probably along the lines of, I'm going to come to know Jesus, but I didn't understand that, so I stopped coming. Then I really went through it was a downside time, very dark. It was getting very, very bad with the relationship, and I was looking for some sense of belonging. I was looking for something that was solid, because in all the areas I was looking for identity, I wasn't finding it. I was like, but there should be something somewhere, there should be a God somewhere. So I met the guy again in July, because I'd stopped working at the restaurant. So the day that I met him was on a Saturday. I remember it was 4th of July, 2014. And on the 5th of July, I said to him, please take me to that church. But you took me in January. I came in Shofar, you were preaching, and I remember you asked the congregation if there's anyone with a word. So before you made the article, the Lord had already told me to let everything go. And I didn't understand how that looked like. I actually went up. And I said, no, the Lord said we must let go. And I didn't understand what that was. So it felt to me like Jesus met me already in the congregation before the article. And by the time the article happened, I was just responding to something that God had already done. And I gave my life to Christ that day. And I got home and I ended that relationship. I took everything out that I had held on to, and a lot of things that I thought belonged in my life, such stuff like pornography, stuff like a lot of things like bottles of alcohol. I took them out because I was literally living on wine so I can just function. Sure. That was the day that I gave my life to Christ, and since then the Lord has changed.
So for you, it was that moment you said on the 5th of July. I remember when I, in a sense, first came to Christ, first made a decision myself. I grew up, I think, similar to you in a Christian home. Went to church every Sunday. It was sort of just a thing our family did, except school holidays, which was great. We didn't have to go to school. We didn't have to go to school, obviously, on the holiday, but we didn't have to go to church because the children's church was on a holiday. But I grew up with what you said, a religious background, a knowledge of Christ, but I didn't know Christ.
Yeah.
And I remember being on a camp at the beginning of my first year at university, and there were people talking about this Jesus and this verse, John chapter 10, verse 10. I'll never forget. I kept hearing it everywhere I went. The second part of it, verse says that Jesus has come for us to have life in abundance. And I had this question in my heart, this following Jesus that I know is different to these other people. They have a relationship with him that I don't. And I remember that night on the camp, one of the nights on the camp, there was sort of we were sitting in a group and someone was speaking, talking about Jesus. And there was just this response in my heart to, I want to know Jesus the way they know Jesus. And I remember sitting there on a little plastic chair in the back of that campsite, the little hall that they had there, praying. I don't remember the words I prayed, but I remember something in my heart was just saying, I want to know this Jesus. And I know that day was a little bit like your 5th of July day. It was that day where everything changed. and where there's a clear before and after on that day. I don't know, Rob, you were talking about friends that were inviting you. You'd come from a non-religious background, not grown up as a Christian home as such. For you, was there a similar experience, sort of a moment where you can look back and say, that was a moment in my heart where I made a decision that I'm going to follow Christ?
I think definitely. I can remember that there was definitely a moment where I was in this rather large church, and responding to the altar call there, and I just remember, I can't remember if it was exactly the day after, but I know that there was a day where I took out all the New Age stuff I had, and I broke it outside, broke every crystal I had, and all those other random little things. So there was definitely a specific time where it was just, I knew that I had to leave things behind, and that these things weren't of God, and that you wanted to change. So definitely.
You mentioned that you decided to break the New Age stuff, break the crystals, get rid of it. What is it in your heart that made you realize in order to follow Christ, you probably have to step away from some of what you embraced in your life up to that stage?
I think a big thing that happened in my life was just, I remember encountering the Lord in a dream. And in the dream, the Lord just shared with me. I remember waking up and then hearing the voice of the Lord just say, "You've made yourself an enemy of me by what you're doing."
Wow.
And it really drew the line for me of what was from God and what wasn't. So I think after that, there was a lot of fear of the Lord that came in, obviously. And I think that's what really, kind of pushed me forward into like, I need to get rid of this stuff then. This is a big no-no. Where previously there was a bit of grayness about what's okay and what's not.
And then that sort of helped you to realize that Jesus is different. He's, in a theological term, we'd say he's other. There's nothing that relates to him. Both of you have mentioned sort of the importance of community of church in your initial walk with Christ, in coming to Christ. But I guess it's also important to remind ourselves that following Jesus, we're not saying go to church. We're saying follow Jesus, and we go to church because we're following Jesus. It's not the other way around. It's not that following Jesus and attending church are not one and the same thing, even though they're really intimately involved. What does following Jesus for you outside of a church context look like, sort of in your day-to-day life?
Sure, that's a very interesting question. I think for me, what it looks like now is waking up in the morning and realizing it's not as much as, like you say, the church is important and it plays a big role in your relationship with Jesus, but I think I've realized that it's a relationship, and God has given me His Word to kind of commune with Him and understand what it looks like now that I am in Him and following Him. So I think spending more time in the Word for me is so crucial. It's a big part of my relationship with Jesus and following Him and worshiping Him as well. I think that can sum up for me like what it looks like to follow Jesus outside of church and being obedient to Him, because I think He also wants to move in our lives outside of the church context, where maybe He might lead me to speak to someone about Him, maybe He might lead me to do something that is completely different to what church is doing. So that's what it looks like for me to outside of the church context.
You've touched on a number of really important disciplines, spending time in the Word, reading the Bible, spoken about worship, about obedience, and those are all aspects we're going to get to in coming weeks. But thanks so much for you guys, for your time today, and for you guys in your groups. I want to encourage you, have a conversation, share a little bit about your experience of following Jesus thus far, what He has meant to you, the questions that you have. Take some of perhaps what we've shared, maybe something stood out to you, maybe something very different in your life, in your groups. Share that with each other, and then we'll see each other again next week as we can continue this conversation. God bless you.